Hey guys, what's up? Today we're about to see 10 of the most controversial JRPGs in the history of gaming. Games that left a lot to talk about actually. And be warned, there's gonna be some ranting involved, maybe some sensitive content, so things are about to get a little hectic. With that clarified, let's begin! Number 10. Valkyria Revolution. All of us big fans of the Valkyria Chronicles franchise were expecting either a fourth game in the series or an official translation for the third game that was released for the PSP several years ago. In 2017, however, we got instead a spin-off called Valkyria Revolution, and it was completely different than what we were expecting. It was now an action RPG outside the strategy box we were used to, with a mediocre story and several gameplay problems. But that's not the controversial part. What happened here was not the criticism the game itself received. No, it was the huge amount of fans pissed off for having received a fourth game in the franchise that was extremely different from previous titles. Maybe they didn't get the fact that this was a spin-off. Maybe Sega never clarified at first that it was not part of the main line. Whatever the case, 1 year later we got Valkyria Chronicles 4 very soon suspiciously in order to garner all the attention to it and drive it off from Valkyria Revolution. Number 9. Tales of Zestiria. The Tales of Zestiria fiasco is very well known nowadays, especially by fans of the series. During the trailers and promotional campaign of the game, the developer showed us a female protagonist by the name Alicia. Therefore, we all thought she was going to be the lead heroine of the game. But after the game was released, after several hours of playthrough, players noticed that Alicia's involvement in the story was literally falling apart. All this before introducing the real heroine of the game, a girl named Rose. Gamers all around the world, including Japan, felt tricked, going as far as to say that Alicia's absence through most of the game was just an excuse to monetize the character. Things settled down after a while when Hideo Baba, the producer of the game, had to give a lot of explanations to cool off the explosion. And while I did feel a little disappointed that the trailers promised me a different female protagonist than the one we got, I never actually cared. In my opinion, people made a scandal out of something so small. This is one of the stupidest controversies in the history of gaming, mainly thanks to oversensitive idiots. Number 8. Valkyrie Anatomia: The Origin. The Valkyrie Profile series is one of my personal favorites, with a cult following fanbase that consists of hundreds of thousands of gamers out there. We spent years hoping to get a third Valkyrie Profile after the excellent two masterpieces we had gotten before for the PlayStation 1 and 2. In 2008, we got a spin-off for the Nintendo DS that we all know very well, but it was just that. A spin-off. We wanted Valkyrie Profile 3, and Tri-Ace, the development team, knew it very well. However, Square Enix's relationship with Tri-Ace began moving in a different direction. If you want to know more in detail, check out a video I made called What the Hell Happened to Valkyrie Profile. But the issue here was that Square shit made us wait 8 long dang years for a new game in the series, which turned out to be an alleged prequel called Valkyrie Anatomia: The Origin 4 Bones. Yep. Of course we were pissed. All of us ranted our asses through the social media, and not only because of that, but also because this game was released only in Japan. I'm pretty sure this fiasco could very well be used as a perfect example for the word disappointment in the dictionary. Number 7. Dragon Quest X. One of the most mind-blowing controversies is how Dragon Quest X, which had finally become an MMORPG like Final Fantasy XI and XIV, was also never released outside Japan, despite its huge popularity and success. It was originally released for the Wii in 2012, later for the Wii U, PC, Android, Nintendo 3DS, PS4, and Nintendo Switch. Yeah, released for all those consoles, and the rest of the world got nothing. I'm not exactly a fan of the franchise, so I have no excuse to be pissed off, but I understand that this really is one of the stupidest decisions Square Enix has made, considering that Dragon Quest has millions of fans worldwide. It's literally the second biggest JRPG franchise of all time! They finally produced an MMORPG for the series, and nobody outside Japan gets it? The developer said that they will have a lot of problems localizing the game, the two main issues being the amount of text and technicalities involving the servers. However, if the fans demand it, they would make every effort to bring Dragon Quest X overseas. Please tell me that isn't the lamest explanation you've ever heard in your life. Number 6. Hyperdimension Neptunia. Fan service has always been present in cartoons of all kinds, all around the world. We know very well that in video games is no exception. In JRPGs, it's the same case. But if there's one game that created the most controversial situation in that regard, was Hyperdimension Neptunia. Since the game's huge success in 2010, every single year we have gotten a new one, and each has been even worse than its predecessor in terms of fan service. But well, these games are precisely that. So bitching about them will equal bitching about pornography for being, well, pornographic. However, that doesn't mean the controversies all around the world are going to just up and vanish. Ever since the first game was released, the series has gotten international attention specifically because of the highly suggestive themes and also the inexcusable sexualization of little teens. I wouldn't go as far as to say this was the first game ever with that issue, but it sure was the first one to turn into a trending nowadays. Number 5. Final Fantasy Mystic Quest. Let's talk about one of the most infamous titles in the history of gaming. Highly controversial for having humiliated gamers in the West back in 1992. It was the first Final Fantasy game to be released in Europe, by the way, and the intention of its developers was to create a simplified RPG for newcomers to the genre. Well, wanna know what happened? Gamers all around the world felt offended when they heard this. Like the first Final Fantasy for the NES was not a good entry? I admit it's a hard game, but why not give us a good challenge instead of one of the easiest RPGs ever made? That's exactly how people reacted back then, and they're still reacting the same way nowadays when somebody new plays the game. In my opinion, it's a decent RPG, far from being challenging, and well, indeed a decent entry for newcomers to the genre, but perhaps simplified more than needed, and boring for those seeking something more solid. However, the truth is that, despite being targeted at younger audiences and newcomers to the genre, the game failed and nobody gave a damn about it. Number 4. Final Fantasy XV. Speaking of Final Fantasy, here's the epitome of chaos. We talked about one of the first games in the series, now we're getting into one of the latest. A game that became an action RPG through and through, completely alienated to the original series. Anyway, people's opinion on this game could be considered as a controversy since it became one of the most successful RPGs in 2016, but also one of the most heavily criticized. Complaints about the character design, the gameplay mechanics, and the story altogether nailed the market with strong negative criticism, while others praised it ironically because of that. Okay, to each their own, I guess. Me, I felt like I was playing Grand Theft Auto, never even once feeling like a Final Fantasy game. I mean, seriously? Poser, stereotyped characters driving in a car all over the world? So to me, this game will always be Grand Theft Fantasy. Yeah. But that's not the main controversy here. What pissed off players, regardless of their opinion towards it, was that a big important part of the story was released by DLCs. That and the fact that it took many years to be developed after the whole Versus fiasco before Final Fantasy XIII. In truth, there's a whole story behind this, a wide background full of controversies that I would need an entire video to explain it properly. But I don't think I'll need it, considering the game's own infamy on the matter. Number 3. Criminal Girls 1 and 2. We're not done with fanservice being the main topic for many controversies out there. Both Criminal Girls games are often subject to the topic due to their insensitive gameplay mechanics. You see, they're small RPGs originally released for the PSP but later remade for the PS Vita, published by Nipponichi Software in the West. These are actually not that popular for a very good reason. Let me explain. You are a warden and your objective is to rehabilitate 7 girls, each being an overly classic anime stereotype, of course, in a dungeon crawling mechanic from an overview perspective. The battle system is turn-based, highly addictive I must admit, that derives of utilizing consecutive attacks from the girls and multiple types of skills. Nothing controversial so far. However, in order to learn any skill at all, or even any form of attack, you need to motivate the girls. What do I mean with motivate? This. Extremely perverted minigames, often including bondage, even to little girls that look no older than 12 years. Do I need to explain more? Yeah, I thought so. Just imagine the critical reception these two games had and how companies have tried their best to obscure them as much as possible. I feel sorry for one reason. The games are awesome in terms of everything else outside the motivation formula, and if they just didn't include sexualized little girls, these would have been the perfect fan service games. But I mean, seriously? Who's a fan of this? What kind of fucked up market were they trying to aim for with these games? Number 2. Breath of Fire 6. Let's take a look now at how one single mobile shitty game ruined an entirely legendary franchise from the 90s. Breath of Fire is one of the most iconic RPG series of all time. But when Capcom wanted to get into the Android trending and its free-to-play bullshit, they thought their already abandoned series would be a good idea to bring back. Well, they were very, very wrong. The game servers lasted for one single year until they shut them down because of the huge backlash and negative criticism it received. So bad it never came out of Japan. The franchise had already vanished after Breath of Fire 5 Dragon Quarter for the PlayStation 2 had also been a commercial failure, only to return to its absolute demise with one of the worst free-to-play games ever made. Well, we know Capcom gives two fucks about its fans, Breath of Fire being a huge victim of their terrible decisions that might never revive after having such a controversial failure in the history of gaming. Fans were literally betrayed with this. Number 1. Final Fantasy VII's Remake. You're asking how can a game that hasn't been released be the most controversial JRPG of all time? Yeah, me too. But we all know why. Think about it without the need of listening to my explanation and you'll understand everything. It started back in 2014 when they announced the making of a new project. A year later, they were going to announce the remake and reveal the trailer. Then they said they were going to release the game through different parts. Yeah, worse than Final Fantasy XV. Then, nothing. Then, more hype. Then, nothing again. Then, speculation. Then, nothing. And it's been like this for almost 4 years. The controversy here is that Square Enix has been heavily promoting this game from time to time, hyping it up to no avail. Considering what the game's stupid director, Tetsuya Nomura, said a while ago, we can only expect the worst case scenario. This moron said that the game might have been announced too soon. Yeah, no shit. Companies nowadays have a tendency to announce things too early, but nothing has felt so exasperating and infuriating than with Final Fantasy VII's Remake. It's not the wait for it to be released, it's everything that has been going on around it for the past few years. I have to admit it really looks like a huge project, but one that might disappoint the audience not only for the notorious changes in the battle system, but also for the way it might be released. But anyway, I guess we're gonna have to wait and see what happens from now on. There's a lot of controversial JRPGs, as a matter of fact. I wanted to make some honorable mentions, like Dragon's Crown and how the art was heavily criticized, and it's a game that technically stands out because of how grotesque it is. But I've talked about that game hundreds of times before. And I think it's the same case with games like Final Fantasy XIII, the entire trilogy, and how it drastically changed the franchise, in my opinion, for the bad. But it also brought a lot of new players to the genre, to the series. Those are controversials. And there's also this other game that is highly controversial for its sexualization of girls. It was called Monster Monpiece. It's a card game. I don't consider that game as an RPG because I played like a couple of hours in it, and there's a lot of dialogue and a lot of stuff going on that it may look like an RPG, but at least from my point of view, it's not an RPG, it's just a card game, pretty much like Yu-Gi-Oh! But the thing is that that's yet another game that is highly controversial because it's the same situation or a very similar situation to games like Mary Skelter Nightmares for the PS Vita or also Criminal Girls. That's it, guys. Those are my honorable mentions. I know there's a ton of more out there, but leave them all if you want to in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends. See you guys next time.